The stagecoach lurched to a halt with a groan of leather and wood, sending up a cloud of dust that hung in the scorching afternoon air. Clara Whitmore pressed a gloved hand to her throat, steadying herself as she peered through the window at Redemption Creek. The town sprawled before her like a collection of weathered bones bleaching under the merciless western sun. She had expected little, but the reality struck her with the force of a physical blow. False-fronted buildings lined the main street, their painted facades peeling like sunburned skin. A few horses stood hipshot at hitching posts, tails swishing at flies. Beyond the town, red rock mesas rose against a sky so blue it hurt to look at, and the horizon stretched endlessly, making her feel small and lost. "Ma'am?" The driver's gravelly voice startled her. "This here's your stop." Clara gathered her traveling dress and stepped down, her eastern boots meeting the hard-packed earth with an unfamiliar sound. The heat hit her immediately, dry and fierce, nothing like the humid summers of Philadelphia. She stood there, carpetbag in hand, watching the stagecoach rumble away until it was just a speck swallowed by distance. The letter in her reticule felt heavier than lead. Randall Pike's careful script had painted a different picture, a thriving ranch, a respectable position, a new beginning. Standing here now. She wondered if desperation had made her too willing to believe. "Mrs. Whitmore?" She turned to find a man approaching from the direction of the bank, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that seemed to absorb the sunlight. Randall Pike looked exactly like his photograph, and nothing like it. The image had captured his strong jaw and neat mustache, but not the coldness in his gray eyes or the calculating way he assessed her, as if tallying up her worth like livestock at auction. "Mr. Pike." She extended her hand, but he barely grazed her fingers before dropping it. "You're smaller than I expected." His voice held no warmth, just a statement of fact. "Can you cook?" "Yes, Good. My wagon's this way." He turned without waiting for her response, clearly expecting her to follow. Clara's cheeks burned, but she lifted her chin and walked after him, her heels clicking on the boardwalk. As they passed the saloon, the bat-wing doors swung open, releasing the scent of whiskey and tobacco. A man emerged, pausing to let them pass, unlike the other cowboys she'd glimpsed. This one moved with a quiet grace, his spurs barely jingling, dark hair curled from under his worn hat, and when he tipped it politely, she caught sight of eyes the color of good Kentucky bourbon. Something passed between them, a recognition of sorts, though they'd never met, before Pike's hand closed around her elbow. "Don't dawdle," Pike said, steering her toward a wagon loaded with supplies. The stranger's gaze followed them, and Clara felt it like a physical touch between her shoulder blades. She risked a glance back to find him still watching, his expression unreadable. Then Pike helped her onto the wagon seat with perfunctory courtesy, and they were rolling away from town. The ride to Pike's ranch took 2 hours through country that grew increasingly desolate. Pike spoke only to point out landmarks: Turkey Creek, Skeleton Ridge, Dead Man's Wash, cheerful names that matched the bleached cattle bones scattered among the sagebrush. Clara tried twice to engage him in conversation about the ranch, about his life here, but he answered in monosyllables until she gave up. The Triple Bar Ranch, when it finally appeared, was substantial but cheerless. The main house squatted like a fortress, built of thick adobe walls with narrow windows. Outbuildings clustered nearby, and she could see cattle dotting the distant pastures, but there were no flowers, no feminine touches, nothing to soften the harsh utility of the place. "Your room's upstairs," Pike said as he helped her down. "Supper's at 6. Don't be late." He strode away, leaving her standing alone with her carpet bag. A Mexican woman appeared from the kitchen door, her face carefully neutral. "I am Rosa," she said softly. "I show you." Clara followed her through rooms that felt more like a tomb than a home. Heavy furniture, dark wood, windows covered with thick curtains that blocked out the light. Her bedroom was small but clean, containing a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single chair. No mirror, no comfort. "Thank you," Clara said. But Rosa was already retreating, her footsteps silent on the stairs. alone. Clara sat on the hard bed and finally allowed her shoulders to sag. Through the window, she could see the sun beginning its descent, painting the mountains purple and gold, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. She thought of the small apartment in Philadelphia, of her husband's grave in the military cemetery, of the debts that had driven her to answer a stranger's advertisement. A door slammed somewhere below, followed by men's voices. Clara rose and smoothed her dress, preparing to go down and begin this new life she'd chosen. Or had it chosen her? She paused at the window, and movement caught her eye. A lone rider was approaching from the direction of town, and even at this distance, something about the way he sat his horse seemed familiar. The rider paused at the ranch gate, and she knew it was the man from town, the one with bourbon eyes. What business could he have here? Pike appeared from the barn, and the two men spoke briefly. Even from here, she could see the tension in Pike's stance, the way he stood between the rider and the house as if guarding his territory. The conversation ended quickly. The stranger touched his hat brim and wheeled his horse around, but not before his gaze swept up to her window. Clara stepped back, heart racing for reasons she couldn't name. When she looked again, he was riding away, a silhouette against the dying light. "Mrs. Whitmore!" Pike's voice cracked like a whip. "Supper." Clara closed her eyes briefly, gathering strength. Then she went downstairs to take her place at Pike's table, already knowing that this house would never be a home. As she entered the dining room, Pike looked up from his plate, and she saw in his eyes what she was to him. Not a wife, not even a woman, but a possession. Something he'd ordered from a catalog, delivered as promised. "Sit," he commanded. "We keep early hours here. You'll need to be up at dawn." She sat, and Rosa served a meal of beef and beans in silence. Pike ate methodically, never looking at her, occasionally barking orders at Rosa in Spanish. When Clara tried to thank Rosa, Pike cut her off. "She doesn't need coddling. Nobody here does." The words hung in the air like a warning. Clara understood then that she had traded one form of captivity for another, and this one came with no gentle memories to soften it, but she had survived worse. She would survive this too. Later, lying in the narrow bed, she heard horses in the yard and men's voices raised in laughter. Through it all, she kept seeing bourbon-colored eyes and remembering that moment of recognition. She didn't even know his name, the stranger who had looked at her and seen, what? Not merchandise, not property, perhaps just a woman, weary from travel and already disappointed by what she'd found. The moon rose, casting silver light across the unfamiliar room. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, and others answered, their voices carrying on the night wind. Clara pulled the thin blanket higher and closed her eyes, but sleep was long in coming. When it did, she dreamed of riding through endless country on a horse she didn't know how to control, while behind her, something dark and patient followed, getting closer with every mile. The days at Triple Bar Ranch fell into a pattern as rigid as prison bars. Clara rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, worked through the day under Pike's watchful eye, and retired to her narrow room each night with hands raw from lye soap and spirits worn thin from isolation. Pike controlled every aspect of her existence, when she could go to town, what she could purchase, whom she could speak to. Even her letters home were subject to his review. 3 weeks into this new life, Clara stood at the kitchen window kneading bread and watching storm clouds gather over the mountains. Rosa had gone to visit her sick sister, leaving Clara alone with the vast emptiness of the house. Pike and his men were out checking the herd before the weather turned, and for once, she could breathe without feeling observed. The dough beneath her hands reminded her of better times, teaching her young husband to bake during their first winter together, laughing as flour dusted his Union blues. James had been gone 4 years now, taken by infection after Antietam rather than battle itself. The injustice of it still burned. He'd survived the fighting only to die of fever, leaving her with debts and memories. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Clara shaped the loaves and set them to rise, then ventured outside to gather the washing before rain struck. The wind had picked up, sending dust devils spinning across the yard and making the sheets snap like sails. She was struggling with a particularly stubborn pillowcase when she heard hoofbeats. A rider appeared through the haze, leading a pack horse. Not Pike. She knew his rigid posture too well. This man rode easy in the saddle, moving with his horse rather than commanding it. As he drew closer, her heart gave an unexpected leap. The stranger from town. He touched his hat brim as he reined in near the clothesline. "Ma'am, storm's coming in fast. You might want help with those." His voice was deeper than she'd expected, roughened by trail dust, but not unkind. Up close, she could see weather lines around those bourbon eyes, a scar along his jaw. The careful way he kept his hands visible and still, the habits of a man who'd learned not to spook people. "I can manage," she said, though the wind immediately made a liar of her by tearing a sheet from her grasp. He dismounted in one fluid motion and caught the escaping linen. "Sam Hart, ma'am. I run horses up in the high country. Your husband asked me to deliver this mare. Said she'd gone lame and needed tending." "Your husband?" The words sat strange in her ears. She took the sheet from him, their fingers brushing briefly. "Mr. Pike isn't here. I can wait." He glanced at the darkening sky. "Though that storm won't mind if I put the horses in the barn?" She should say no. Pike had made it clear that she wasn't to entertain visitors, especially men, but the first fat raindrops were already falling, and there was something in Sam Hart's manner that made refusal seem foolish. "Please do." They worked in companionable silence, gathering the last of the washing as the sky opened up. By the time they reached the kitchen door, both were soaked through. Clara hesitated on the threshold, acutely aware of proprieties, of Pike's rules, of this stranger's presence. "I can wait in the barn," Sam offered, reading her uncertainty. Thunder crashed directly overhead, and the rain became a solid wall of water. Clara made her decision. "Don't be foolish. Come in. I'll make coffee." The kitchen felt smaller with him in it. He removed his hat and hung it carefully on a peg, revealing dark hair that curled when wet. While Clara stoked the stove and set coffee to brew, he stood quietly by the door, dripping onto Rosa's clean floor. "There are towels in that cupboard," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "Appreciate it." They dried off as best they could, the domesticity of the moment both strange and oddly comfortable. When she handed him a cup of coffee, he wrapped his hands around it gratefully. "You're from back east," he said, not a question. "Philadelphia. Long way from home." She thought of her empty rooms, the sympathetic looks of neighbors, the dwindling bank account. That was the idea. He studied her over the rim of his cup, and she had the unsettling feeling he understood more than she'd said. The rain drummed against the windows, creating a peculiar intimacy in the lamplit kitchen. "How long have you worked for Mr. Pike?" she asked, needing to fill the silence. "I don't work for Pike." Something shifted in his expression. "Just agreed to deliver the horse as a favor. We have an understanding." The careful way he chose his words made her wonder what kind of understanding required such diplomacy. Before she could ask, he set down his cup and moved to the window. "Rain's letting up. I should go. But Mr. Pike will know I delivered the mare. That's all that matters." He turned back to her, and his expression softened. "This isn't an easy life for anyone, ma'am, even harder when you're far from everything familiar." The unexpected kindness threatened her composure. She looked away, blinking hard. "I knew what I was agreeing to." "Did you?" The question hung between them. When she found the courage to meet his eyes again, she saw no judgment there, only a weary recognition that made her wonder what choices had driven him to this hard country. He collected his hat and moved toward the door, then paused. "I run a small spread up near Crystal Creek. If you ever need anything, if there's ever trouble, it's the cabin with the red door, about 5 miles north of town. Mr. Pike wouldn't approve of. Pike approves of very little. I've noticed." His smile held no humor. "The offer stands, all the same." Then he was gone. leaving only damp footprints on the floor and the lingering scent of leather and rain. Clara stood at the window watching him ride away, the mare following docilely on a lead rope. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp. The world washed new. When Pike returned an hour later, he found her in the kitchen, bread baking and supper started. Everything as it should be. He grunted approval and went to check the mare, never asking about her afternoon. But that night at dinner, he watched her with narrowed eyes. Sam Hart was here. It wasn't a question. Clara kept her hand steady as she served his plate. "He delivered the mare you requested? And left when the rain stopped." Pike's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "That man is trouble. He's got a past, things that would turn a decent woman's stomach. You're not to speak with him again." "I hardly—" His fist hit the table, making the dishes jump. "You'll do as you're told. I didn't bring you here to question me." Clara felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the same trapped sensation she'd known in Philadelphia when creditors circled and options dwindled. But she'd learned to hide such feelings. "Yes, Mr. Pike," he resumed eating, satisfied with her submission. But as Clara cleared the dishes, she found herself thinking of a cabin with a red door and a man who'd offered help without conditions. It was foolish, dangerous even, but for the first time since arriving in Redemption Creek, she didn't feel entirely alone. That night, she lay awake listening to Pike's heavy tread in the room below, the house settling around her like a tomb. Through her window, stars scattered across the vast western sky, and she wondered if Sam Hart was looking at the same stars from his cabin in the high country, wondered what past Pike had hinted at, wondered why a stranger's kindness felt more real than her intended husband's grudging shelter. The wind picked up again near midnight, rattling her windows and bringing the scent of sage and distance. Clara closed her eyes and tried to forget bourbon-colored eyes and gentle hands catching wind-blown sheets. She had made her bargain. She would honor it. But deep in her heart, in a place Pike's rules couldn't reach, a small flame of rebellion began to burn. The truth about Randall Pike revealed itself in pieces, like rot beneath fresh paint. Clara found the first evidence while cleaning his study, a locked drawer he'd forgotten to secure properly. Inside lay a daguerreotype of a young woman with haunted eyes, letters tied with ribbon, and a newspaper clipping about a wife's accidental death from a fall downstairs. Her hands trembled as she read the letters. Margaret Pike's desperate words painted a picture of escalating control, isolation, and fear. The final letter, dated just days before her death, spoke of plans to flee to her sister in California, plans that never materialized. "Find something interesting?" Clara spun around. Pike filled the doorway, his face carved from stone. She'd been so absorbed she hadn't heard his approach. "I was cleaning, and the drawer—" He crossed the room in 3 strides, slamming the drawer shut. His hand closed around her wrist, not quite painful, but with the promise of it. "You don't go through my things. Ever." "I didn't mean—" "Get out!" She fled to the kitchen, heart hammering. Rosa looked up from grinding corn, read Clara's face, and crossed herself. That small gesture confirmed what Clara had begun to suspect. She wasn't the first woman Pike had brought to this ranch, and the others hadn't simply left. Days passed in tense silence. Pike watched her constantly now, his gray eyes following her movements like a predator tracking prey. She felt the weight of his attention even when he wasn't in the room, as if the house itself had become an extension of his will. Then came the morning Sam Hart arrived with a string of horses for the summer market. Clara was hanging wash when she heard the thunder of hooves. Through the sheets, she glimpsed him working with Pike's men, his easy competence making the others look clumsy. He never glanced toward the house, but she sensed his awareness of her presence. Pike emerged from the barn, and the 2 men spoke briefly, even from a distance. Their mutual dislike was evident in the rigid set of their shoulders, the careful space maintained between them. Business concluded. Sam prepared to leave. That's when Pike called out, loud enough for Clara to hear. "There's a dance Saturday night, celebrating the church raising. You'll come with me, show the town you're settling in proper." It wasn't an invitation, but a command. Clara nodded from her place by the clothesline, knowing resistance would only bring trouble. But as Sam mounted his horse, he finally looked her way. The concern in his eyes made her chest tight. He touched his hat brim, a greeting and farewell combined, then rode off with his string of horses. Saturday arrived too quickly. Pike presented her with a new dress, blue silk that felt like shackles. "You'll do," he said after surveying her appearance, as if she were livestock groomed for show. The town hall blazed with lanterns, fiddle music spilling into the night. Inside, the good people of Redemption Creek had transformed the rough space with bunting and wildflowers. Clara felt their eyes as Pike led her in, curious, pitying, knowing glances that made her skin crawl. "Mrs. Pike!" The banker's wife descended on them, all false smiles and sharp eyes. "How wonderful to finally meet you properly. We've all been so curious about Randall's new bride." "We're not married yet," Clara corrected quietly. The woman's smile grew sharper. "Of course not. How? Proper?" Pike's hand tightened on Clara's elbow as he steered her through introductions. She smiled until her face ached, answered the same questions repeatedly, endured the weight of speculation. Everyone knew why she was here, what bargain she'd made. Mail-order bride, bought and paid for. The music changed to a waltz, and Pike led her onto the floor. He danced correctly but without grace, holding her like a possession to be displayed. Around them, couples moved with easy familiarity, ranchers with their wives, cowboys with local girls, lives intertwined by choice rather than transaction. "You're doing well," Pike said, mistaking her compliance for contentment. "Keep this up and things will go smoothly." The threat beneath his words was clear as spring water. Clara fixed her smile and endured another turn around the floor. When the music ended, Pike deposited her near the refreshment table and went to discuss business with the other ranchers. "You look like you could use some air." She turned to find Sam Hart beside her, dressed in his best, which wasn't much, but he wore it with more dignity than Pike wore his expensive suit. In the lantern light, his eyes seemed darker, more dangerous. "Mister, Pike wouldn't—" "Pike's occupied. We'll be for a while, discussing water rights." He offered his arm. "Just to turn around the building. You look ready to faint." She shouldn't. Every rational thought screamed against it. But the room was stifling, the curious stares oppressive, and Sam's presence offered something she'd almost forgotten existed. Choice. She took his arm. Outside, the night air tasted of freedom. They walked in silence until the music faded to a distant rhythm. Finally, Sam spoke. "Are you all right?" Such a simple question, so impossible to answer. Clara felt tears threaten and blinked them back. "I'm perfectly fine." "Liar." The gentle accusation broke something in her. "What would you have me say? That I've made a terrible mistake? That I'm trapped? What good would that do?" "Sometimes saying it helps." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Sometimes someone needs to hear it." In the moonlight, she could see the scar along his jaw more clearly, the weathered lines that spoke of hard years, yet his touch on her arm remained gentle. "Careful." "Why do you care?" she whispered. "Maybe because I know what it's like to be trapped, to have people judge you for choices you didn't make." His smile held bitter knowledge. "Pike tell you about me yet?" "He said you have a past." "That's one way to put it." Sam looked toward the distant mountains. 5 years ago, a man died. I was there, tried to stop it, but that didn't matter to anyone. Man was rich, connected. I was just a drifter. Judge gave me a choice, hang or leave Texas forever. But if you were innocent, justice and law aren't always the same thing. He met her eyes again. "Point is, I know about cages, some made of iron, some of circumstance. Yours might not have bars, but it's still a prison." Clara couldn't speak past the tightness in her throat. Here was someone who understood, who saw through the facade to the truth beneath. It terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "I should get back," she managed. "Should you?" He reached out, fingers barely brushing a strand of hair that had escaped her careful pins. There's always another choice. Clara. Always another door. The use of her given name sent heat through her. They stood suspended in moonlight, the space between them charged with possibility. Then voices approached, Cowboy sneaking outside for a smoke, and the spell shattered. Sam stepped back, proper distance restored. But as he escorted her around the building, he spoke quietly. 4th of July celebrations in 2 weeks. Whole town turns out. I'll be there. A promise. A temptation. Clara knew she should discourage him, but the words wouldn't come. They reached the door too soon, light and music spilling out like accusation. "Thank you for the air," she said formally. "Clara." Her name on his lips stopped her. "Be careful. Pike's not a patient man, and he's noticed how I look at you." Before she could ask what he meant, he melted back into the shadows. Clara returned to the dance alone, pasting on her smile as Pike materialized at her elbow. "Where were you?" "Just getting air. It's quite warm." His eyes narrowed, but people were watching. He couldn't make a scene here. "We're leaving." The ride home stretched silent and ominous. Clara sat rigid beside him, aware of his contained fury. The violence coiled beneath his correct exterior. When they reached the ranch, he helped her down with bruising fingers. Inside, away from public eyes, he grabbed her shoulders and shook her hard. "You think I'm a fool? Think I don't know what you were doing?" "I wasn't. Hart's been sniffing around since you arrived. You encourage him again. You'll regret it. Both of you will." He released her with a shove that sent her stumbling. Clara caught herself against the wall, tasting fear like copper in her mouth. "Get to bed," Pike snarled. "And remember, you came here of your own will. You're mine until I say otherwise." Clara fled upstairs, hands shaking as she locked her door, though she knew the flimsy lock offered no real protection. Through her window, the mountains loomed black against stars, and somewhere among them stood a cabin with a red door. She pressed her palm against the cool glass and finally admitted the truth Sam had seen so clearly. She was trapped. But for the first time since arriving, she wondered if she might also be brave enough to escape. The blow came without warning. Clara was setting Pike's breakfast on the table when his hand caught her across the face, sending her sprawling against the cupboard. Coffee splattered across Rose's clean floor like dark blood. "Too much salt in the eggs," Pike said calmly, settling into his chair as if nothing had happened. Clara touched her split lip, tasting copper. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Rose's sharp intake of breath from the doorway. Their eyes met. Rose's filled with knowing sorrow, Clara's with shock that was rapidly crystallizing into something harder. "Clean that up," Pike ordered, already cutting into his steak. "Then get my good shirt ready. I'm riding to Tucson on business. Be gone 3 days. 3 days. Clara kept her face down as she mopped the floor, mind racing. 3 days of freedom from his watching eyes, his controlling presence, his casual violence. When Pike finally left, trailing Dust and 2 of his men, she stood at the window until they vanished over the ridge. "Senora," Rosa said softly, "your face." Clara let the older woman tend to her lip with cool cloths and some kind of herbal salve. As Rosa worked, she spoke in careful English. "The other one, Margaret, she tried to run. He catch her at the train station. After that," she shook her head. "After that, the stairs. He killed her. C'est, but who would believe? He is important man. She was nobody, like us." That night, Clara lay sleepless, cataloging her options. She had $43 hidden in her sewing basket. Not enough for passage back east. No family who could help. No friends in this harsh country. Except the cabin with the red door. By morning, she'd made her decision. If Pike returned to find her gone, he'd hunt her down like Margaret. But if she could somehow make him let her go, make it seem like his idea. She was feeding chickens when Sam Hart appeared, riding in with the easy confidence of a man who belonged to the land. Her traitorous heart leaped at the sight of him. "Heard Pike went to Tucson," he said without preamble, dismounting near the coupe. "News travels fast. Everything travels fast here. His expression darkened as he noticed her swollen lip. "Clara, don't!" She turned away, scattering more feed than necessary. "Why are you here?" "To see if you're all right. To tell you." He paused, choosing words carefully. "There's a wagon train passing through next week, heading to California. They need a cook." California. The word shimmered with possibility. "I have no money for passage." "I do." She faced him then, searching his face. "Why would you?" "Because nobody should live in fear." His voice roughened. "Because I've watched Pike destroy 2 women already. Because—" He stopped, jaw tight. "Because— you know why." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken truth. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she didn't look away. "He'll come after us. Let him. You don't understand. He owns me, legally. The contract? To hell with contracts." Sam stepped closer, and she caught his scent, leather and soap and something wild. "You're not property. You're not cattle to be branded and corralled." "Fine words," she said bitterly. "But the law—" "The law here is what men like Pike make it, but there are other laws, older ones." His hand rose as if to touch her face, then fell. "Come with me, Clara, tonight." Every practical argument rose to her lips. The danger, the impossibility, the consequences. But beneath the logic, her heart hammered yes, yes, yes. "I need time to prepare," she heard herself say. "Tomorrow night, after midnight. I'll meet you where the old cottonwood stands by the creek." His smile transformed his face, years falling away to reveal the man he might have been before Texas, before exile, before whatever sorrows had carved those lines. "I'll be there." He turned to go, then looked back. "Pack light. We'll be riding hard." After he left, Clara moved through her day in a dream. She prepared food for Rosa to serve Pike when he returned, mended clothes she'd never wear again, and carefully, gathered her few precious possessions, her mother's cameo, James's last letter, the $43. That night, she slept fitfully, starting at every sound. Dawn came gray and cold, matching her nerves. She forced herself to act normally, knowing Rosa watched with worried eyes. As evening approached, snow began to fall, unusual for this late in spring. Clara saw it as a sign. Snow would cover tracks, muffle sounds. At 11:30, she crept downstairs, carpet bag in hand, heart thundering so loud she feared it would wake the house. The kitchen door creaked as she eased it open. Snow swirled in, sharp and clean. She pulled her cloak tight and stepped into the night. The path to the cottonwood was treacherous in the dark, snow already obscuring familiar landmarks. Clara stumbled more than walked, fear and cold making her clumsy. What if Sam had changed his mind? What if Pike had returned early? What if— Clara! He materialized from the swirling white, leading 2 horses. Without a word, he took her bag and secured it to a saddle, then helped her mount. His hands lingered at her waist. "Steady and sure. Can you ride? I'll learn." His laugh was soft, admiring. "That's my girl." They rode in silence, Sam leading through paths she couldn't see. The snow fell heavier, transforming the world into something new and strange. Behind them, the Triple Bar Ranch disappeared as if it had never existed. Hours passed in cold and concentration. Clara's hands numbed on the reins, her body aching from the unfamiliar motion. But she didn't complain, didn't ask to stop. Freedom had a price. She would pay it, finally. As dawn lightened the sky to pearl, Sam led them into a grove of pines. Hidden among the trees stood a small cabin, weathered but solid, and on its door, faded but visible red paint. "We'll rest here," he said, helping her down. Her legs nearly buckled, but he caught her, holding her until strength returned. "You did well, better than most men would have." Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. Sam built a fire while Clara stood awkwardly, suddenly aware of what she'd done, alone with a man not her husband, fleeing a legal contract, throwing away respectability for something as insubstantial as hope. "Second thoughts?" Sam asked quietly, reading her face. "No." And surprisingly, she meant it. "Just, what happens now?" "Now we'd rest. Tonight we keep riding. 2 days to the border, then we're free." He paused, studying her. "Unless you'd rather go to California." "I meant it about the wagon train." Clara moved to the fire, holding her hands to the warmth. "I don't want California. I want—" She struggled for words. "I want to choose, for once in my life. I want to decide my own path." "Then choose." She turned to find him watching her with those bourbon eyes, patient and careful, and full of something that made her breath catch. The firelight flickered between them, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "I choose this," she whispered. "I choose you." He crossed to her then, slowly, giving her time to retreat. When she didn't, his hand rose to cup her face, thumb ghosting over the bruise Pike had left. "You sure?" Instead of answering, she rose on her toes and kissed him, gentle at first, then deeper as his arms came around her. He tasted of coffee and snow and freedom, and when they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Clara," he said roughly, "we should we?" She felt wild, reckless, more herself than she'd been in years. "I've done everything I should all my life. Should married James, should mourned properly, should sold myself to Pike for security. Where has should gotten me?" He caught her hands, pressing them between his. "You're tired, scared. When you're thinking clearer." "I'm thinking perfectly clearly." She pulled one hand free, tracing the scar on his jaw. Maybe for the first time. He caught her hand again, but this time brought it to his lips. "We have time, Clara. All the time in the world now. Let me court you proper, the way you deserve." The tenderness undid her. She leaned into his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the solid reality of him. "I don't even know if Clara's my name anymore. Am I still Mrs. Whitmore? Miss? I don't know who I am now." "You're you," he said simply. "That's all that matters. The rest we'll figure out as we go." Outside, the snow continued to fall, erasing their tracks, covering their sins, blessing their escape with white silence. And in the cabin with the red door, 2 broken souls began the slow work of healing, one careful touch at a time. The mountains embraced them like a fortress of stone and pine. For 3 days, Clara lived a life she'd never imagined, waking to birdsong instead of commands, learning to read weather in cloud formations, discovering muscles she didn't know existed from long hours in the saddle. Sam proved a patient teacher, showing her how to hobble horses, find water, build smokeless fires that wouldn't betray their position. "You're a natural," he said on the 4th morning, watching her saddle her mare with increasing confidence. "Most people take weeks to learn what you've picked up in days." "Desperation is a powerful teacher," Clara replied, checking the cinch like he'd taught her. His expression sobered. "We should be far enough now. Pike's reach has limits." But even as he said it, they both knew better. Men like Pike didn't accept loss gracefully, especially when that loss involved property they considered theirs. They were climbing toward a high pass when Sam suddenly raised his hand. Pulling up short, Clara had learned to read his signals. "Danger!" He dismounted silently, ground-tying his horse, and crept forward to a cluster of boulders. When he returned, his face was grim. "Riders below, 5 of them, moving systematic-like, checking every deer trail." Clara's stomach dropped. "Pike? His men, more likely. He's probably covering the main roads himself." Sam swung back into the saddle. "We need to go higher. There's another route, but it's rough." Rough proved an understatement. The trail, if it could be called that, wound through terrain that had Clara gripping her saddle horn and praying to every deity she could name. Loose shale clattered beneath the horse's hooves, echoing off canyon walls like gunshots. Once, her mare slipped, and for a heart-stopping moment Clara thought they would both tumble into the void. But the sturdy animal found her footing, and they pressed on. By afternoon, they'd gained enough elevation to see for miles. The beauty stole Clara's breath, peaks marching to the horizon. Valleys painted purple with shadow, eagles riding thermals above it all. But Sam's attention focused on their back trail. There, he said quietly, pointing, far below. She could make out 5 dark specks moving ant-like across a meadow. Even at this distance, their purposeful movement sent chills through her. They're tracking us. Trying to, but see that? He indicated gathering clouds to the west. Storm coming. If we can reach Three Fingers Pass before it hits, the snow will wipe our trail clean. They rode hard through the afternoon, racing the weather. The temperature plummeted as they climbed, and Clara's breath came in white puffs. Her hands numbed inside her gloves. But she didn't complain. Behind them, the riders had gained ground, close enough now to make out individual horses. The first snowflakes fell as they crested the pass. Within minutes, the gentle dusting became a whirling white wall. Sam reached over and grabbed Clara's reins, leading both horses as visibility dropped to mere feet. "Trust me," he shouted over the wind. She did, completely. Through the blinding snow, he guided them, following some internal compass she couldn't fathom. Time lost meaning in the white fury of the storm. Clara's world narrowed to the dark shape of Sam ahead, the steady movement of her horse, the cold that bit through every layer. Then, miraculously, walls rose around them. Not natural stone, but fitted logs, a structure. Sam dismounted and fumbled with a door. And then blessed warmth hit Clara's face. "Old line shack," Sam explained. Helping her down, her legs wouldn't hold, and he half carried her inside. "Cowboys used it during Roundup. Haven't been up here in years, but I remembered." The cabin was tiny, barely 12 feet square, but it felt like a palace. Sam got Clara settled on a rough bunk, then went back for the horses, bringing them into a lean-to shelter attached to the cabin's side. By the time he returned, Clara had managed to light the oil lamp they'd found, casting golden light on log walls chinked with mud. "You saved us," she said through chattering teeth. "Not yet." He knelt by the fireplace, coaxing flame from old kindling. "But Pike's men won't find us tonight. Nothing could track through this storm." Soon fire crackled in the hearth, driving back the cold. They shared jerky and hard biscuit from Sam's saddlebags, melted snow for water, and slowly, warmth returned to Clara's bones. Outside, the storm raged like a living thing, but inside their small refuge, peace settled over them. "Tell me about before," Clara said, surprising herself. "Before Texas. Who were you?" Sam stared into the fire for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Nobody special. Father was a schoolteacher in Ohio. Mother died birthing me. I grew up on books and dreams of adventure." His smile turned rueful. "Careful what you wish for." "What happened?" "Really? I was driving freight wagons, saving money to buy land, stopped in a town called Crossroads to resupply. There was a girl daughter of the biggest rancher in the county. Sweet thing, too young to know better than to smile at a nobody teamster." He poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling. Her father didn't appreciate her democratic notions. When she turned up bruised, he needed someone to blame. I was convenient. But surely she told them. She told them what her father wanted her to say, that I'd forced my attentions, that she'd had to fight me off. His voice held no bitterness, just weary acceptance. I was nobody. He owned the judge, the sheriff, half the town. Only thing that saved me from hanging was a traveling preacher who'd seen me 20 miles away when the girl was getting hurt. Give them credit. They let me leave instead of manufacturing better evidence. Clara moved from the bunk to sit beside him on the floor, close enough to feel his warmth. "And you came here, far as I could get without leaving the country, built my cabin, started catching wild horses, kept my head down. 5 years of being nobody again, but my own kind of nobody. Until I came." He turned to her then, firelight dancing in his eyes. "Until you came." The space between them hummed with possibility. Clara knew she should move back, maintain distance, preserve whatever fragments of propriety remained. Instead, she leaned closer. "I'm glad I came," she whispered. His hand rose to cup her cheek, work-roughened thumb tracing her cheekbone. "Even with Pike hunting us, even with everything you've lost, I haven't lost anything that matters." The truth of it surprised her. A house that was never home, a future that was never mine. "What's that against this? This? Freedom, choice, you." He kissed her then, deep and sure and full of promise. When they broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, he rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do right by you. Clara, court you proper. Marry you legal when we're clear of this mess." "Sam Hart," she said with mock severity. "Are you proposing?" "Maybe I am." His grin flashed. "Though I should warn you, I'm no prize. Just a horse wrangler with a leaky cabin and more past than prospects." "Perfect," she said, meaning it. "I'm a runaway mail-order bride with a talent for bad choices and $43 to my name." $43? "Well, that changes everything. I'm only after your fortune." She laughed, free and genuine, and he caught the sound with another kiss. Outside, the storm began to ease, but neither noticed. They had found something rarer than shelter from the snow. They had found home in each other. Later, wrapped in blankets on separate bunks like proper unmarried folk. Clara listened to Sam's steady breathing and the dying wind. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Pike wouldn't give up easily. The trail ahead remained dangerous and uncertain. But tonight, in a tiny cabin high in the mountains, two souls had chosen each other despite every obstacle. And that, Clara thought as sleep finally claimed her, was its own kind of miracle. The fire burned low, casting moving shadows on rough walls. In the lean-to, horses stamped and settled. Snow continued to fall, gentle now, covering their tracks and blessing their flight with nature's own amnesty. And in the darkness before dawn, new paths opened before them, leading not back to lives others had chosen, but forward to futures they would write themselves. The Apache camp appeared like a mirage through the shimmering heat teepees and wickiups clustered near a spring-fed stream. Smoke rising from cooking fires, children playing in the dust. Sam guided them in slowly, hands visible, until riders appeared to escort them the final distance. "Sam Hart," the lead rider said in accented English, lowering his rifle. "Long time." "Good to see you. Joseph, is your father well?" "He lives. Come." Clara had heard stories about the Apache wild tales of savagery that filled Eastern newspapers. But the camp they entered bore little resemblance to those lurid accounts. Women ground corn and tended gardens. Old men sat in shade, working leather. Children ran laughing between the dwellings, pausing to stare at the white woman with curious eyes. Chief Miguel Nakai received them in his teepee. Age had silvered his hair but not dimmed his keen gaze. He studied Clara with interest before addressing Sam. "You bring trouble, my friend." "I know. I'm sorry." "No sorrow between us. You saved my son's life. The debt remains." He gestured for them to sit. "The white man Pike searches for you. He offers gold for information." Clara felt her stomach clench, but Sam's hand found hers, steady and reassuring. "We need a few days' rest. Then we'll move on." "Rest you will have. But this woman, she is not your wife." Heat rose in Clara's cheeks. Even here, propriety followed. But Miguel's expression held no judgment, only curiosity. "She will be," Sam said firmly, "when we're safe." Miguel nodded slowly. "My wife's cousin, Maria, will give her shelter. It is not good for unmarried ones to share a dwelling. Even among whites, yes?" And so Clara found herself in Maria's wickiup, surrounded by Apache women who eyed her with frank interest. Maria, a widow near Clara's age, spoke enough English to translate the rapid-fire questions. "They want to know why you run from the rich man," Maria explained. "Why choose the poor one?" Clara thought of Pike's cold eyes, his controlling hands, the fear that had lived in her belly like a coiled snake. Then she thought of Sam's patience, his gentle strength, the way he looked at her like she was precious. "Because riches that come with chains are poverty," she said. And love that comes with freedom is wealth, Maria translated, and the women nodded approval. One ancient grandmother reached out to pat Clara's hand, speaking rapidly. She says you are wise for a white woman? Maria relayed with a smile. Also, she says the poor one is not so poor if he has good horses and strong hands. The days that followed passed in a strange peace. Clara learned to grind corn, to identify edible plants, to understand a few Apache words. The women taught her their ways with the casual assumption that knowledge should be shared. She watched Sam work with the younger men, helping break horses, and marveled at how he fit into this world so different from her own. But peace couldn't last. On the fourth day, a scout rode in hard, horse lathered with sweat. Clara didn't need to understand Apache to read the urgency in his words. Sam found her grinding corn with Maria. His face told her everything. Pike's coming, with the sheriff and a posse. They'll be here by sunset. Clara's hand stilled on the grinding stone. How many? 15, maybe 20. He knelt beside her. Miguel won't turn us over, but Pike's threatening to burn the camp if they harbor fugitives. Then we leave. Now. Clara, no. She stood, brushing corn dust from her skirts. These people have shown us kindness. I won't repay that with destruction. Miguel gathered the camp's leaders. The debate that followed needed no translation. Some voices raised for fighting, others for negotiation. Finally, the chief raised his hand for silence. We will not give you to this man, he told Sam in English. But neither will we see our children burn for white man's argument. He paused, thinking, there is another way. Old way. He spoke rapidly to Joseph, who looked startled, then thoughtful. Father and son debated briefly before Joseph turned to Sam. Trial by challenge. Old law even whites sometimes honor. The wronged man faces the accused in single combat. Winner speaks truth. Sam's face went still. Pike won't fight me himself. Then he names a champion, as do you. Joseph's smile was sharp. Unless the great Randall Pike fears to face the man he claims stole from him? Clara gripped Sam's arm. No, there has to be another way. There isn't. Sam covered her hand with his. And Joseph's right. Pike's proud. If we make this public enough, he'll have to accept or lose face. The rest happened with dreamlike speed. Riders went out to intercept Pike's posse with the challenge. The Apache prepared a ceremonial ground, and Clara found herself standing with Maria as the sun peaked overhead, watching dust clouds approach from the east. Pike rode at the head of his men, Sheriff Watson beside him. His face when he dismounted was carved from stone, but Clara saw the rage burning in his eyes as they found her. This is nonsense, he told Watson. The woman's my property. I have papers. The man Hart claims otherwise, Miguel said calmly. He says the woman came unwilling, that you used force and fear. This is old law, from when your people first came to this land. Do you accept challenge, or do you admit his words are true? Clara watched Pike calculate. To refuse would be to acknowledge Sam's claims. To accept meant risking his reputation on a fight. Around them, Apache warriors stood ready, making clear that simply taking what he wanted wasn't an option. I accept, Pike said finally. But I'm a businessman, not a brawler. My foreman, Jake Morrison, will stand for me. Clara's heart sank. She'd seen Morrison, a mountain of a man who'd once beaten a drifter near to death for looking too long at Pike's horses. And I stand for myself, Sam said quietly. The rules were simple. No guns. Fight until one man couldn't rise or yielded. Winner's word became truth in the eyes of all present. Clara wanted to close her eyes as the two men circled each other, but forced herself to watch. Morrison had reach and weight, but Sam had speed and years of hard living. They came together like storm fronts colliding. Morrison's first blow would have felled an ox, but Sam wasn't there. Sliding aside and landing a punishing strike to the bigger man's ribs, they grappled, broke apart, came together again. Blood splattered the dusty ground from Sam's split lip, Morrison's broken nose. Time stretched like taffy. Clara felt every blow Sam took as if on her own body. Maria gripped her arm, whispering what might have been prayers or curses. The crowd, Apache and white alike, watched in tense silence. Morrison got Sam down, hands around his throat. Clara bit back a scream, but Sam brought his knee up hard, breaking the hold. Rolling free, both men staggered upright, breathing hard, circling again. Then Morrison made a mistake. Confident in his size, he rushed forward for a bear hug that would crush ribs. Sam dropped low, swept the bigger man's legs, and Morrison went down hard. Before he could rise, Sam had him in a chokehold. "Yield," Sam gasped. Morrison struggled, face purpling. Pike shouted something Clara couldn't make out, but slowly, inexorably, the fight went out of the big man. His hand slapped the ground in surrender. Sam released him and stood swaying. Clara ran to him, catching him as his knees buckled. His face was a mess of blood and bruising, but his eyes were clear. "It's done," he whispered. Pike stood rigid as Sheriff Watson approached him. "Seems the man spoke in truth. Randall, the woman came of her own will." "This proves nothing," Pike snarled. "She's still bound by contract." "A contract signed under false pretenses holds no weight," Watson said firmly. "You represented yourself as something you weren't. The lady's free to choose." Clara felt Pike stare like a physical weight. For a moment, she saw murder in his eyes. Then he turned on his heel, mounted his horse, and rode away without a backward glance. His men followed. Morrison helped into his saddle by two others. The camp erupted in celebration, but Clara only had eyes for Sam. With Maria's help, she got him to the healer's teepee. As the old woman cleaned his wounds with practiced hands, he caught Clara's fingers. "Worth it," he said through split lips. "You fool," she said, crying now. "You beautiful, brave fool." "You're fool," he corrected. "If you'll have me. Always." She promised. Always. That night, the Apache held a feast, by firelight, with drums beating and stars wheeling overhead. Sam and Clara stood before Miguel and spoke words that bound them more surely than any courthouse document. Maria had dressed Clara in a borrowed doeskin dress, soft as silk, and wove flowers in her hair. Sam, battered but upright, looked at her like she hung the moon. "Now you are one," Miguel pronounced. "In the eyes of the people and the spirits of this land, may your path be long and your burdens shared." They spent their wedding night in a teepee set apart from the camp, and if Sam's injuries limited their activities, neither minded. They had claimed each other in front of witnesses, defied those who would separate them, chosen love over law. Everything else could wait. The courthouse in Redemption Creek had never seen such a crowd. Word of the showdown between Sam Hart and Randall Pike had spread like wildfire, drawing folks from neighboring towns who sensed drama worth witnessing. Clara sat straight-backed in the witness chair, hands folded in her lap, meeting Pike's poisonous glare with steady composure. "State your name for the record," Judge Thompson instructed. "Clara Hart," she said clearly, taking quiet satisfaction in Pike's flinch at the surname. "Formerly Clara Whitmore. Mrs. Hart, you've made serious allegations against Mr. Pike. Please tell the court, in your own words, what transpired during your time at the Triple Bar Ranch." Clara drew a deep breath. For weeks she'd carried these truths like stones in her chest. Now, finally, she could set them down. "I came to Redemption Creek as Mr. Pike's intended bride through a mail-order arrangement. He had represented himself in his letters as a kind widower seeking companionship. Instead, I found a man who viewed me as property he'd purchased." "Ego." "Objection," Pike's lawyer interrupted. "The witness is offering opinion, not fact." "Overruled. Continue, Mrs. Hart." "From my first day at the ranch, Mr. Pike controlled every aspect of my life. When I could leave the house, who I could speak with, what I could purchase. When I displeased him." She touched her jaw, remembering. "He struck me for putting too much salt in his eggs." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sheriff Watson, sitting in the front row, leaned forward with interest. But the violence wasn't the worst part. Clara continued. I found letters from his late wife, Margaret, hidden in his study. Letters describing escalating abuse, her plans to escape. She died falling downstairs just days after writing that she intended to flee to California. Your Honor, Pike's lawyer shot to his feet. This is hearsay and speculation. I have the letters, Clara said calmly. Rosa Delgado, Mr. Pike's housekeeper, retrieved them after I left. She can verify their authenticity. Judge Thompson's bushy eyebrows rose. These letters were taken from Mr. Pike's property without permission. They were evidence of a crime, Sam interjected from his seat. Evidence Pike was destroying. Rosa saw him burning papers the day after Clara left. Mr. Hart, you'll have your turn to speak. The judge warned. Clara continued her testimony, each word lifting weight from her shoulders. She told of Sam's small kindnesses, of choosing love over security, of their flight through the mountains. When she finished, the courtroom sat in charged silence. Pike took the stand next, his version painting Clara as a gold digger who'd seduced a simple horse trader to escape her obligations. But his story crumbled under cross-examination. Why had he offered such a large reward for a woman he claimed was worthless? Why had he brought 20 armed men to retrieve one small female? Why were there no other witnesses to Clara's supposed misconduct? Then Rosa took the stand. The usually quiet woman spoke with surprising force about Margaret Pike's bruises, her terror, her final days. She produced not only Margaret's letters, but a diary she'd kept hidden for 5 years, documenting Pike's treatment of both wives. I say nothing before because who listens to Mexican woman? Rosa concluded. But this one, Clara, she brave enough to run, so I be brave enough to speak. Sam's testimony came last. He spoke simply, without dramatics, about meeting Clara, recognizing her fear, offering help. When asked about their relationship, he met the judge's eyes directly. I fell in love with a woman who chose courage over comfort. If that's a crime, I'm guilty. And this Apache ceremony, the judge pressed. You consider that a legal marriage? More legal than any contract based on lies and fear? Sam replied. But if the court requires, we'll repeat our vows anywhere, before anyone. Clara is my wife in every way that matters. Judge Thompson called a recess. Clara found herself surrounded by townswomen offering support. Several shared their own stories about Pike in whispers, his heavy hands at dances, his threats to husbands who owed him money, the relief that someone had finally stood up to him. When court reconvened, the judge's expression was grave. This court finds that the contract between Randall Pike and Clara Whitmore was entered into under false pretenses and is therefore null and void. Furthermore, based on evidence presented, this court recommends that Sheriff Watson investigate the death of Margaret Pike. Pike erupted. This is a kangaroo court. That woman is a... Mr. Pike. The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot. You will control yourself or be held in contempt. As for Mrs. Hart, this court recognizes the marriage performed by Chief Miguel Nakai. The Apache have been conducting binding ceremonies in these lands far longer than this courthouse has stood. However, to satisfy all legal requirements, I'm prepared to perform a civil ceremony here and now, if the couple wishes. Clara looked at Sam, saw her own joy mirrored in his battered face. We wish, they said in unison. And so, in a packed courthouse still buzzing with scandal, Clara and Sam spoke their vows again, this time before a judge and half the county, with Rosa as witness and Sheriff Watson standing guard to prevent Pike from causing trouble. When Judge Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, the courthouse erupted in applause. Pike stormed out, but not before Sheriff Watson informed him he was now under investigation. Within months, Pike would flee to Mexico ahead of murder charges, his ranch sold to pay debts and settlements, but Clara wouldn't learn that until later. For now, she stood in the courthouse steps beside her husband, her true, legal, chosen husband. While rice and congratulations rained down, Sam's arm around her waist was the only anchor she needed. So, Mrs. Hart, he murmured in her ear, where would you like to go for your honeymoon? Home, she said without hesitation. "That cabin with the red door. That's not much of a honeymoon. It needs work, roof leaks, chimney smokes, barely enough room to turn around." "Perfect," she said, turning in his arms. "We'll fix it together." He kissed her there on the courthouse steps, in full view of God and Redemption Creek. And Clara felt the last chains of her old life fall away. She'd come west as property, survived as a fugitive, and emerged as a free woman. The frontier had tested her and found her strong enough to forge her own path. Later, as they rode toward the mountains and their new life, Clara thought about the letter she'd write to her sister, not a cautionary tale, but a liberation song. Sometimes the greatest risk was staying safe. Sometimes you had to burn down the life others planned for you to build one worth living. The cabin appeared through the pines as the sun set, its red door glowing like a promise in the golden light. Home. Not because it was grand or comfortable, but because it was chosen, because it was theirs. Sam helped her dismount, then surprised her by sweeping her into his arms. "Tradition says I carry you over the threshold." "Tradition says a lot of things." Clara laughed. "We haven't been very traditional so far." True enough, but he carried her anyway, kicking the red door open and stepping through into their future. "Welcome home, Clara Hart." "Home," she repeated, the word tasting like freedom on her tongue. Through the window, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Somewhere an owl called, and the wind sang through the pines. And in the cabin with the red door, two people who'd risked everything for love began the sweet work of building a life together. One chosen day at a time, 1 year later. Clara sat at the rough-hewn table in their cabin, pen poised over paper as morning light streamed through windows they'd added together. The improvements to their home were modest but meaningful glass panes instead of oiled paper. A proper cook stove Sam had traded horses for. Shelves holding her few books alongside his leather working tools. Every addition represented choice, partnership, building rather than enduring. "My dearest Catherine," she wrote to her sister back east. "Your letter about your upcoming marriage reached us yesterday. How strange that a year ago, I too was preparing to wed a stranger, though under such different circumstances. Let me share with you what I've learned. Not to frighten you from your path, but to remind you that the path itself must always remain yours to choose." Through the window, she could see Sam working with a young colt, his movements patient and sure. He'd built a reputation as the finest horse gentler in 3 counties, men bringing their wildest animals for his touch. They lived simply but well, no longer running, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. "Marriage," Clara continued writing, "is not about finding someone to complete you, for you are already whole. It's about finding someone who sees that wholeness and celebrates it, who stands beside you as an equal partner in whatever storms may come. I came west believing I needed a man's protection, his money, his name to survive. I learned instead that what I needed was the courage to protect myself, to value my own worth, to claim my own name." She paused, remembering that desperate woman who'd stepped off the stagecoach in Redemption Creek, that Clara had been running from poverty and grief. This Clara had learned to run toward joy and possibility. "If your James is kind to you, if he speaks to you as an equal, if he celebrates your thoughts and dreams rather than seeking to control them, then you are blessed. But if you find yourself making excuses for harshness, if you feel yourself growing smaller in his presence, if fear takes root where love should bloom, then remember you always have choices. The world tells us that security matters more than happiness, that a bad marriage is better than no marriage. The world lies." Sam came in for the midday meal, bringing with him the scent of hay and honest work. He kissed her temple as he passed, a casual intimacy that still made her heart flutter. They ate in comfortable silence, occasionally sharing observations about the day. No commands, no criticism, no walking on eggshells. Just 2 people who'd chosen each other, continuing to make that choice daily. "Letter to Catherine?" Sam asked, noting the papers. "Yes, she's nervous about her wedding." Natural enough. Marriage is a leap of faith even under the best circumstances. He reached across the table to take her hand. Any regrets about your own leap? Clara turned her hand to intertwine their fingers. Only that I didn't leap sooner. That afternoon, while Sam returned to his horses, Clara walked to the creek that gave their valley its music. The wildflowers were blooming. Indian paintbrush and columbine, yarrow and wild roses. She gathered a bouquet, thinking of all the women who'd come west as she had, hoping for better lives. How many found what they sought? How many settled for survival when they dreamed of love? Back at the cabin, she finished her letter. I won't lie to you, Catherine, the West is hard. I've learned to shoot a rifle, birth a foal, mend harnesses, and preserve meat for winter. My hands are rough now, my skin darkened by sun. Some would say I've become unladylike. I say I've become myself. But the hardships are nothing compared to the freedom. To wake each morning knowing the day is mine to shape. To speak my thoughts without fear of punishment. To love without reservation or condition. To build a life based on mutual respect rather than ownership. I enclosed a photograph Sam and I had taken at the harvest dance. Yes, that's really me in the doeskin dress. A gift from Apache friends who sheltered us during our darkest hour. You wouldn't recognize the frightened widow who left Philadelphia. I barely recognize her myself. Whatever you decide about your marriage, remember this. You are not property to be purchased, not a problem to be solved, not a creature to be tamed. You are a woman with a mind, a heart, a soul that belongs to you alone. Anyone who truly loves you will understand that. Anyone who doesn't isn't worthy of you. Don't let anyone, not society, not family, not even me, choose your path for you. But if you find yourself on a path that leads to darkness, remember there are always other trails. Sometimes we must travel through wilderness to find our true home. Sometimes we must lose everything to discover what actually matters. Give my love to everyone back east. Tell them I'm happy, truly happy, in a way I never knew was possible. Tell them the West didn't break me, it revealed me. And if any of them ever need refuge, there's a cabin with a red door in the mountains of Arizona where they'll find welcome. Your loving sister, Clara Hart, P.S. Sam says to tell your James that if he doesn't treat you like the treasure you are, a certain horse wrangler knows 40 ways to tie knots that won't come loose. He's joking, mostly. That evening, as purple shadows claimed the valley, Clara and Sam sat on the porch they'd built together. The horses grazed peacefully in the meadow. Somewhere in the distance, wolves sang to the rising moon. But their song held no fear now, only wildness calling to wildness. Penny for your thoughts? Sam asked. Just thinking about journeys, how I came west looking for security and found something so much more valuable. What's that? Myself. She leaned into his warmth. And you, but myself first. That's what made finding you possible. He pulled her closer, and they sat in comfortable silence as stars emerged overhead. The same stars that had witnessed her flight, her fear, her transformation. Now they blessed her peace. You know, Sam said eventually, there's still that wagon train to California if you ever want to see the ocean. Clara smiled. Maybe someday, but not yet. I'm still discovering all the wonders right here. Such as a man who sees my strength as beauty, a life we build together board by board, freedom to choose, every single day. She turned to meet his eyes. That's worth more than all the security money could buy. You sure? Could have had a big ranch, servants, silk dresses, and chains made of gold are still chains. Clara stood, pulling him up with her. Besides, I have everything I need. A good horse, a warm bed, useful work, and a man who knows that loving someone means setting them free, not clipping their wings. Inside the cabin, as they prepared for bed, Clara noticed Sam watching her with an odd expression. What is it? Just thinking about that first day, seeing you by the clothesline at Pike's place. You looked like a bird in a cage. Beautiful, but dying inside. He crossed to her, framing her face gently in his calloused hands. Now you soar. We both do, she corrected. rising on her toes to kiss him. That's the secret, isn't it? Not finding someone to live for, but someone to live alongside. Later, as moonlight silvered the cabin floor and Sam's breathing deepened into sleep, Clara thought about all the women still trapped in cages of circumstance or choice. Her letter to Catherine was one small key offered through the bars. Perhaps it would help. Perhaps not. But she'd spoken her truth, claimed her story, offered what wisdom she'd earned through pain and courage. Outside, an owl called through the darkness, a sound that once would have frightened her but now seemed like a blessing. The night was vast and full of mystery, but she no longer feared it. She'd learned to navigate by her own stars, to trust her own strength, to build her own shelter from whatever storms might come. And in the cabin with the red door, two hearts beat in rhythm, two souls rested in chosen peace, two lives intertwined not by law or necessity, but by the daily decision to love, respect, and cherish what they'd built together. It wasn't the ending Clara had imagined when she'd answered a stranger's advertisement. It was infinitely better. It was real. Thank you all for listening to this tale of courage and love from the Old West. I'm curious to know where in the world you're hearing this story. Please share in the comments below so we can connect across the miles. Just as Clara's letter connected hearts across the frontier. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of the American frontier. And share your thoughts on Clara and Sam's journey. Did their story of choosing love over security resonate with you? Let us know in the comments.